Remember the girl who was locked in a basement 3 years ago, barely alive and holding a list of names under her pillow? Remember the woman who walked into a Seoul boardroom, speaking 6 languages and owning restaurants across 3 continents? Well, forget both of those versions of her, because what you're about to witness is the birth of someone infinitely more dangerous. Chairman Nkosi is done playing games. The stolen child has become a force of nature with $47 billion, international connections, and a mind that thinks 20 steps ahead of people who still believe she's dead. But here's what's going to absolutely destroy you emotionally. While she's planning the most satisfying takedown in revenge history, she's also falling in love with the one man who could either save her soul or break her heart. Because in exactly 72 hours, Seo will be walking down the aisle thinking she's finally won, while her supposedly dead sister sits in the front row with evidence that will end 3 generations of lies. The invisible girl is about to become impossible to ignore. And when she does, Seoul's elite society will learn that some debts can only be paid in total destruction. This is part 3, beautiful souls, where justice isn't just served cold. It's served perfectly, brilliantly, and with enough fire to burn down everything built on stolen ground. Are you ready to watch the most epic comeback in K-drama history? Because Nkosi is about to collect everything that was always hers, and the reckoning is going to be legendary. Hold on to your hearts, because this finale is going to leave you cheering, crying, and believing in justice all over again. Let's dive into the moment when the stolen child finally comes home to claim her kingdom. The war began on a Tuesday morning with a phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Kwan," Nandi said into her phone, standing at the window of her Seoul office, 40 floors above the city where she had once bled in an alley. "It's time." On the other end of the line, the elderly man who owned the shop next to Park Family Restaurant cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Nkosi, are you certain about this? Once I release these documents, there's no going back." "Mr. Kwan, you saved my life 3 years ago when you called that ambulance. Now I'm asking you to help me save other people's lives by exposing the truth about what the Park family has been selling to restaurants across Seoul." The health department records? Everything. The supplier contracts, the chemical analysis reports, the complaints that were filed and mysteriously disappeared. All of it. And the photographs from that night? Those too. The pictures of Seo standing over me in the alley. The audio recording of her hiring those men. The financial trail showing payments from her personal account to people who changed their witness statements. Mr. Kwan was quiet for a long moment. "Child, they're going to lose everything." "Good. They stole everything from me first." "When do you want me to make the calls?" "Today. Start with the health department at 9 a.m. The investigative journalists get the documents at noon. The police receive the evidence about my attack at 3 p.m. By evening, the story will be everywhere." "And you? Where will you be when all this happens?" Nandi smiled, looking down at the city that had no idea it was about to witness the most spectacular fall from grace in its history. "I'll be having dinner with Jung Do-hyun, watching the news coverage and pretending to be surprised." The call ended, and Nandi walked to her desk where 3 folders sat waiting. Each one contained enough evidence to destroy a different aspect of the Park family empire. Each one represented years of stolen work, stolen money, and stolen identity finally being returned to its rightful owner. Folder 1. Food safety violations. Chemical analysis reports showing illegal preservatives in Park family products. Hospital records connecting contaminated food to dozens of illnesses across Seoul. Supplier contracts prove they knew exactly what they were selling, and chose profits over public safety. Folder 2. Financial fraud. Documentation of the 50 million won cooking competition prize that had been stolen from her. Bank records showing how that money had been used to expand the Park family restaurant empire. Tax documents with forged signatures and falsified income reports. Folder 3. Attempted murder. Photographs, audio recordings, and witness statements proving Min Seo had hired people to kill her 3 years ago. Financial records tracing payments from Min Seo's accounts to the men who attacked her. Medical records from her 3-month coma. 3 folders, 3 different angles of attack. 3 ways to ensure that when the Park family fell, they would never be able to get back up. Her assistant Elena knocked on the door and entered with a tablet showing news websites and social media feeds. Ms. Nkosi, everything is ready. The journalists have been briefed, the health department inspectors are standing by, and the police have been provided with all necessary documentation. What about the timing? Mr. Kwan will make the first call in exactly 15 minutes. By this evening, every news outlet in Seoul will be covering the story. By tomorrow morning, it will be national news. Perfect. And Jung Do-hyun? He's confirmed for dinner at 8 p.m., the private dining room at your restaurant, just as you requested. Nandi nodded, then looked at her watch. In exactly 6 hours, the empire built on her stolen life would begin crumbling. In exactly 70 hours, Min Seo would walk down the aisle expecting to marry into Seoul's most powerful family, not knowing that by then she would be unemployed, disgraced, and probably under arrest. Elena, there's one more thing I need you to do. Of course. I need you to arrange for flowers to be delivered to the Park family home this afternoon. Something beautiful and expensive. What should the card say? Nandi smiled the way her mother had taught her to smile when delivering calculated destruction disguised as kindness. Congratulations on everything you've built. It's been quite a journey. Signed, someone who remembers. At exactly 9 a.m., Mr. Kwan called the Seoul Metropolitan Health Department and provided them with detailed documentation of chemical contamination in Park family food products. The inspector who took the call initially dismissed it as probably nothing more than a disgruntled customer complaint. But when he opened the email attachments and saw laboratory reports showing preservative levels that were 10 times the legal limit, his attitude changed completely. "Get me a team," he told his supervisor within minutes of reviewing the evidence. "We need to conduct immediate inspections of every restaurant and grocery store that sells Park family products." How many locations are we talking about? 347 restaurants, 68 grocery stores, 2 wholesale distributors, and we need to do it all today before they have time to remove contaminated inventory. That's impossible. It's not impossible, it's just expensive. But when people are being poisoned by food that's supposed to be premium quality, expense is not a consideration. The health department raids began at 10:30 a.m. Health inspectors arrived simultaneously at Park family restaurants' 3 locations, their main production facility, and their corporate headquarters. They carried court orders authorizing immediate seizure of all food products, preservatives, and chemical additives pending laboratory analysis. Park Jun-ho was in a meeting with potential investors when the inspectors walked into his office. "Mr. Park, we need to discuss some serious concerns about your food safety protocols." "I'm sorry, what kind of concerns?" "The kind that involve industrial chemicals being used in products intended for human consumption." The meeting with investors ended immediately. The investors left looking worried and making phone calls to their lawyers. Park Jun-ho was left sitting in his office watching health department officials carry away boxes of documents and samples of everything his company had produced in the past 6 months. This is obviously some kind of mistake, he told the lead inspector. Park family products meet all safety standards. Mr. Park, we have laboratory reports showing preservative levels that could cause liver damage, neurological problems, and potentially death. Either your quality control processes are completely inadequate, or you've been knowingly selling contaminated food to the public. That's impossible. We would never. The evidence suggests otherwise. You'll need to come with us to provide a formal statement. By noon, photographs of Park Jun-ho being escorted from his office by health department officials were all over social media. The headlines wrote themselves, "Popular restaurant chain under investigation for food contamination," and "Seoul family business accused of poisoning customers." But the health department investigation was just the beginning. At exactly 12 p.m., investigative journalist Kim Sun-hee received an anonymous email containing financial documents that made her coffee cup slip from her hands and shatter on her office floor. She had been covering Seoul's restaurant industry for 15 years. She had seen every kind of scandal, from tax evasion to labor violations to trademark disputes. But she had never seen anything like the evidence that had just appeared in her inbox. "Chief," she called to her editor across the newsroom, "I need to speak with you immediately." "What is it?" "I just received documentation of the biggest fraud case in the Korean restaurant industry's history." She spread the financial records across his desk, pointing to highlighted sections that showed money transfers, competition prize documentation, and bank statements spanning 3 years. This shows that Park Family Restaurant built their entire expansion using prize money that was stolen from one of their own employees. 50 million won from a national cooking competition that was supposed to go to their daughter, but the family kept it and gave her less than 1% of the actual prize. How much less? They told her the prize was 200,000 won after taxes and fees. The actual prize was 50 million won. They stole 49.8 million won from their own child. The editor studied the documents more carefully, his expression growing more serious with each page. This is not just fraud. This is elder abuse, financial exploitation, and probably tax evasion. It gets worse. According to these adoption records, the daughter whose prize money they stole was not actually their biological child. She was adopted from a hospital after a house fire, but the adoption paperwork appears to have been forged. Forged how? Look at these dates. The adoption was filed 8 days after the fire, but according to hospital records, no family members came forward during the first week. Social Services has no record of any legal adoption process. The editor looked at the journalist with the expression of someone who had just realized he was looking at the biggest story of his career. How reliable is this source? Unknown. But the documentation appears to be authentic. Bank records, hospital files, competition certificates, legal documents. Either someone has access to an incredible amount of confidential information, or they have very good reasons for wanting the truth to come out. What do you need? Time to verify everything. Legal review to make sure we can publish without getting sued. And probably police protection, because when this story breaks, some very powerful people are going to be extremely angry. You have whatever you need. This could be the expose of the decade. Kim Sun-hee spent the next 4 hours calling banks, hospitals, competition organizers, and government agencies to verify every detail in the anonymous documents. Each phone call confirmed what the papers claimed. Each verification made the story bigger and more devastating. By 4 p.m., she was writing the article that would destroy the Park family completely. Seoul restaurant empire built on stolen prize money and forged adoption papers. By 5 p.m., the article was online. By 6 p.m., it was trending on every social media platform in Korea. By 7 p.m., it was being discussed on television news programs across the country. And at exactly 8 p.m., Jung Do-hyun arrived at Nandi's restaurant for dinner, carrying flowers and wearing the expression of someone who had spent the entire day watching a carefully planned operation unfold with military precision. "Good evening," he said, kissing her cheek gently before taking his seat across from her. "Interesting day for news coverage." "Was it? I've been in meetings all afternoon. What happened?" "The Park family food contamination scandal broke this morning. The financial fraud story hit this afternoon. By evening, every news outlet in Seoul was covering the story of the stolen prize money and forged adoption papers." Nandi looked genuinely surprised. "Really? How terrible for them." "Nandi? Yes? You can stop pretending to be surprised. I know exactly what you did today." She smiled the way she had smiled in Milan when investors thought they could buy her restaurant, confident and completely unrepentant. "What do you think I did?" "I think you spent 3 years gathering evidence. I think you found the perfect witnesses and the right journalists and the proper authorities. I think you coordinated a simultaneous attack on their business, their finances, and their public reputation. And I think you timed it perfectly to cause maximum damage right before Min Seo's wedding." "That sounds very complicated." "It was brilliant. Thank you. But we're not finished, are we?" Nandi reached across the table and touched his hand gently. "Jung Do-hyun, there's something else you need to know." "About the attack evidence?" "About what's going to happen at Min Seo's engagement party tomorrow night." The engagement party was supposed to be the social event of the season. 500 guests, live music, food from Seoul's most exclusive caterers, and a guest list that included everyone who mattered in Korean high society. Min Seo had spent 6 months planning every detail, from the flower arrangements to the wine selection, to the photographer who would document her entry into Seoul's elite family circles. She had no idea that her supposedly dead sister had spent the same 6 months planning something very different for the same evening. By the next morning, every major newspaper in Korea was running front-page stories about the Park family scandal. Television news programs were showing footage of health department raids and interviewing food safety experts about the dangers of industrial preservatives in commercial food products. Min Seo woke up to 17 missed calls from reporters, 43 text messages from friends asking if the stories were true, and a voice message from the engagement party venue asking whether the event was still scheduled to proceed. She called her parents immediately. "Papa, what's happening? The news is saying terrible things about our company." "It's all lies, Min Seo. Someone is trying to destroy us with false accusations and forged documents. But they're showing our bank records on television. They're talking about Soo Jin's prize money." "Soo Jin is dead. She has been dead for 3 years. Whatever these people are claiming, it has nothing to do with reality." "Then how do they have her financial information? How do they have hospital records and competition certificates?" "I don't know. But we're going to fight this. We're going to prove that everything they're saying is false." "Papa, the engagement party is tonight. Should we cancel?" "Absolutely not. Canceling would make us look guilty. We're going to proceed exactly as planned. We're going to show Seoul that we have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of." But Min Seo was not convinced. She spent the morning reading news articles and social media posts about her family's alleged crimes, watching her reputation crumble in real time. The comment sections were particularly brutal. "I ate at Park Family Restaurant last month and got food poisoning. Now I know why." "Stealing prize money from your own daughter. What kind of people do that?" "Those adoption papers are obviously fake. Someone needs to investigate what really happened to that poor girl." I hope they all go to prison for what they did. By afternoon, Min Seo was receiving calls from worried guests asking whether the engagement party was still happening and whether they should attend given the scandals surrounding her family. Of course, the party is still happening, she told each caller. These accusations are completely false, and we're going to prove it. But privately, she was terrified. Terrified that the allegations might be true. Terrified that her perfect wedding was about to be ruined. And most terrified of all, terrified that somehow, impossibly, Soo Jin was still alive and orchestrating everything. She called Jung Seojun at his office. Seojun, have you seen the news? I've seen it. My family is very concerned. What kind of concerned? The kind where they're asking serious questions about whether this engagement should proceed. You can't be serious. Min Seo, if even half of what they're reporting is true, my family cannot be associated with yours. We have our own reputation to consider. But none of it is true. It's all lies and forged documents. Then prove it. Show me evidence that contradicts what the journalists are reporting. I need time to gather evidence. You have until tonight. If you can't prove these allegations are false by the time our families make public statements at the engagement party, then we need to seriously consider whether this marriage should happen. The call ended with Min Seo sitting in her room, surrounded by newspaper clippings and printouts of social media posts, trying to figure out how her perfect life had fallen apart in less than 24 hours. She had no idea that the worst was yet to come. That afternoon, Jung Do-hyun met Nandi at her office to review the final preparations for the evening's events. The police will make the arrest tonight. During the party, in front of all the guests, maximum public impact and maximum humiliation. What about the evidence? Mr. Kwan will be there as the primary witness. The medical records from my coma will be presented. The audio recordings of Min Seo hiring the men will be played. And the financial trail showing payments from her account to people who changed their witness statements will be documented. She'll be arrested for attempted murder. Among other things, conspiracy, fraud, intimidation of witnesses, enough charges to ensure she spends the next 15 years in prison. Jung Do-hyun was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of what was about to happen. Nandi, are you sure about this? Once tonight happens, there's no undoing it. Min Seo will lose everything. Your adoptive parents will lose everything. The entire Park family will be destroyed. Good. They destroyed me first. But what about after? What happens to you when all this is over? Nandi turned away from the window, where she had been watching the city prepare for evening, and looked directly at him. I don't know. I've spent 3 years planning justice and building the power to deliver it. I haven't spent much time thinking about what comes after justice. Maybe it's time to start thinking about that. What do you mean? I mean, what does Nandi Nkosi want when she's not fighting battles and destroying enemies? What does she want when she's just living her life? The question caught her off guard. For 3 years, she had defined herself entirely by her mission to expose the truth and punish the people who had stolen her identity. She had not considered what kind of person she might be when that mission was complete. I want to cook, she said finally. I want to build restaurants where young chefs get credit for their work. I want to create a foundation that helps stolen children find their families. I want to build something positive instead of just tearing down something negative. What else? What do you mean? I mean personally. What do you want in your personal life? She looked at him for a long moment, recognizing the question he was really asking. I want to find out if what's happening between us is real, or if it's just adrenaline and shared purpose and the excitement of working together on something dangerous. What do you think it is? I think I'm falling in love with you. And I think that terrifies me more than anything else that's happened in the past 3 years. Jung Do-yeon stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. It terrifies me too. But I think I'm willing to be terrified if it means finding out where this goes. Even after tonight, even after I destroy your brother's fiancée and humiliate your family in front of Seoul's entire elite society? Even then, because I know who you really are. I know why you're doing this. And I know that the woman who survived everything you survived and built everything you built is someone worth being terrified for. Beautiful souls? I cannot even breathe right now. The way Jung Do-hyun just declared his feelings while knowing exactly what Nandi is about to do. The way she admitted her terror about falling in love. And the fact that we are literally hours away from the most epic takedown in K-drama history. Min Seo has no idea that her engagement party is about to become her public execution. And I am living for every second of this perfectly orchestrated justice. But hold on to your hearts, because what happens at this engagement party is going to be so satisfying, so brilliantly devastating, that you'll be cheering and crying at the same time. The invisible girl is about to step into the spotlight, and when she does, Seoul's elite society will witness the most spectacular fall from grace in their history. This is about to get absolutely incredible. That evening, the grand ballroom at the Lotte Hotel was decorated with white roses and crystal lights that cast everything in a soft, romantic glow. 500 guests arrived in designer gowns and perfectly tailored suits, ready to celebrate the engagement of Min Seo Park to Jung Seo-jun. The guest list read like a directory of Seoul's most powerful families. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, and socialites, who collectively controlled billions of dollars and influenced every major decision in Korean high society. None of them knew they were about to witness the most shocking scandal in Seoul's social history. Min Seo looked beautiful in a way that required a team of professionals and several $1,000s worth of makeup and styling. Her dress was custom designed, her jewelry was borrowed from a museum collection, and her smile was practiced to perfection. But Jung Do-yeon could see the strain around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching, the forced brightness in her voice when she greeted guests who asked about the recent news coverage. "Thank you so much for coming, despite all the ridiculous rumors," she told each group of arrivals. "It means everything to our families that you are here to celebrate with us." Jung Seo-jun stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in his formal wear and clearly wishing he was anywhere else. The past 24 hours had been filled with difficult conversations with his parents, emergency meetings with the family's public relations team, and increasingly tense discussions with Min Seo about the allegations surrounding her family. "Seo-jun, you seem distracted," one of his business associates commented during the cocktail hour. "Just a lot on my mind. Wedding planning is more stressful than anyone warns you about. What about these news stories? Are you concerned about the allegations against your fiancé's family? We're confident that everything will be cleared up soon. Sometimes successful families become targets for people who want to damage their reputation." But his voice lacked conviction, and everyone who knew him well could tell that he was not nearly as confident as he claimed to be. At 8 p.m., the formal program began with speeches from both families. Park Jun-ho spoke first, standing at the podium with a kind of forced confidence that fooled no one. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate the engagement of our beautiful daughter, Min Seo to Jung Seo-jun. Despite some recent challenges and false accusations, we are proud of the life we have built and excited about welcoming the Jung family into our circle." The applause was polite but subdued. Everyone in the room had read the news stories, Everyone knew about the health department investigations and the financial fraud allegations, and everyone was wondering whether they were about to witness something much more dramatic than a typical engagement celebration. Jung Do-hyun's father spoke next, his remarks carefully crafted to sound supportive without actually endorsing anything specific. "We are pleased to welcome Min Seo into our family and look forward to a long and happy relationship between our two families." Again, polite applause that somehow felt like people were waiting for something more interesting to happen. At 8:30, Jung Do-hyun excused himself from the family table and walked to a private area near the ballroom entrance. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text message to Nandi. "It's time." At exactly 8:35, the ballroom doors opened, and a woman walked in who made every conversation stop mid-sentence. She was tall and elegant, wearing a dress that was simple but obviously expensive, with jewelry that caught the light in a way that suggested real diamonds rather than costume pieces. Her hair was styled in a way that looked effortless, but had probably taken hours to achieve. And her face, when people looked closely, bore a distinctive silver scar that ran from her left cheekbone to her chin. She walked through the room with the kind of confidence that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it, heading directly toward the family, tables at the front of the ballroom. Most of the guests had no idea who she was, but a few people recognized her from news coverage of Milan's restaurant scene or from business articles about successful international entrepreneurs. And 3 people in the room recognized her for entirely different reasons. Park Jun-ho dropped his wine glass. Kim Soo-min grabbed her husband's arm and whispered something urgent in his ear. And Min Seo went completely white, staring across the ballroom at someone who was supposed to be dead. Nandi Nkosi walked directly to the microphone at the front of the room. "Good evening," she said, her voice carrying easily across the suddenly silent ballroom. "I apologize for interrupting, but I have something important to share with all of you." "Who is that?" Someone whispered loudly enough to be heard. "That's Nandi Nkosi," another guest replied. "She owns restaurants in Europe and just partnered with Jung Do-hyun's company." "What is she doing here?" "I have no idea, but this is about to get very interesting." Nandi looked directly at Min Seo, who was still frozen at her table, then smiled the way Thandi had taught her to smile when delivering justice disguised as kindness. "My name is Nandi Nkosi, and I am here tonight because I have a very personal connection to the Park family. You see, 23 years ago, they stole me." The ballroom erupted into confused murmuring. Guests turned to each other, asking what she meant, whether this was some kind of performance, and whether someone should call security. I was 4 years old when my house burned down, and my mother was injured trying to save me. I was taken to Seoul National University Hospital with severe burns and no family members available to care for me immediately. She paused, letting her words settle across the room. The Park family found me at the hospital and told the staff they were distant relatives who could provide temporary care while my mother recovered. But instead of caring for me temporarily, they forged adoption papers and stole my identity. Park Jun-ho stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We don't have to listen to these lies." "Please sit down, Mr. Park. I'm not finished." Something in her voice made him sit down immediately. "For 23 years, I lived as Soo-jin Park, cooking in their restaurant kitchen while they took credit for my recipes and prize money. When I won the national cooking competition, I was told the prize was 200,000 won after taxes and fees. The actual prize was 50 million won, which they used to expand their business empire." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Several guests pulled out their phones to record what was happening. When I started asking questions about my past and my real identity, Min Seo Park hired people to attack me and leave me for dead in an alley. I spent 3 months in a coma, and when I woke up, I decided it was time to come home and reclaim what was always mine. Minseo finally found her voice. This is insane. Soo-jin died 3 years ago. This woman is obviously mentally ill and trying to exploit our family's recent difficulties. Did I die, Minseo? Nandi asked, walking closer to the family table. Because I remember you standing over me in that alley, telling me that you would rather I disappear than let me destroy everything your family had built on my stolen work. That's impossible. You're lying. Am I? Nandi pulled out her phone and played an audio recording that filled the ballroom through the sound system. Minseo's voice came through the speakers, clear and unmistakable. I was not going to let that happen. All of it is going to you. The restaurants, the reputation, the money. Everything our family built. You were never really part of this family. You were a project. A charity case that got out of hand. The recording continued with Minseo's voice, explaining that she wanted Soo-jin to disappear again, and that whether someone found her in time was a matter of luck. The ballroom fell completely silent, except for the sound of the recording playing. When it ended, Minseo was shaking visibly. That's not... I never said those things. You said them to me while I was bleeding on the ground after your hired men attacked me. The same alley where Mr. Kwan found me and called an ambulance. The same Mr. Kwan who has provided police with photographs and witness testimony about everything that happened that night. The ballroom doors opened again, and this time police officers walked in, led by a detective who approached the family table directly. Minseo Park, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and intimidation of witnesses. This is impossible, Minseo said, backing away from the detective. I didn't do any of those things. Ma'am, we have extensive evidence, including audio recordings, photographs, financial records, and witness testimony. You need to come with us. Young Seo-jun stood up from the table, staring at his fiancée with the expression of someone who had just realized he had been living with a complete stranger. Minseo, is this true? Did you really try to kill your sister? She's not my sister. She was never my sister. But did you try to kill her? Minseo looked around the ballroom at 500 guests who were watching her with a combination of shock, fascination, and disgust. At her parents, who were sitting frozen at their table. At Young Seo-jun, who was looking at her like he had never seen her before. I was protecting my family, she said finally. I was protecting everything we worked for. By hiring people to murder someone? She was going to destroy us. She was going to take everything away. She was going to take back what belonged to her in the first place. The detective approached Minseo with handcuffs. Ma'am, I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. Wait, Minseo said desperately. Young Seo-jun, you can't let them do this. We're getting married. Your family has influence. You can make this go away. Young Seo-jun looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the engagement ring she had given him 6 months earlier. Minseo, I don't know who you are, but you are not the person I thought I was marrying. He placed the ring on the table between them. The engagement is over. Minseo was handcuffed and escorted from the ballroom while 500 guests watched in stunned silence. The sound of her high heels clicking against the marble floor was the only noise in the room until the doors closed behind her. Park Jun-ho and Kim Soo-min were arrested 5 minutes later on charges of kidnapping, identity fraud, financial exploitation, and child abuse. They left the ballroom with considerably less drama than their daughter. But the impact was just as devastating. When the police had finished, Nandi was left standing at the microphone, facing a ballroom full of Seoul's elite society, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from admiration to terror. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said calmly, "I apologize for disrupting your evening, but sometimes justice cannot wait for a more convenient time." She looked directly at Jung Seo-jun, who was still sitting at the family table, looking like someone had just explained that everything he thought he knew about the world was wrong. "Mr. Jung, I am sorry this happened at your engagement party. But I thought you deserved to know who you were planning to marry before it was too late to change your mind." "Thank you," he said quietly. "I think you may have saved my life. I think you may be right." She turned back to address the entire ballroom. The Park family business empire was built on stolen recipes, stolen prize money, and 23 years of unpaid labor from someone they kidnapped as a child. Every award they won, every expansion they funded, every success they celebrated was purchased with money that belonged to me. She paused, letting her words sink in. "Effective immediately, all Park family assets will be seized and redistributed to establish the Chairman Nkosi Foundation for Missing Children. Named after my mother, who spent 23 years searching for me and died 6 months before she could see justice done." Applause began slowly, with 1 or 2 people clapping, then spreading across the ballroom until 500 guests were giving her a standing ovation. Nandi looked out at the crowd of powerful, wealthy, influential people who were applauding the complete destruction of a family that had seemed successful and respectable just hours earlier. "Thank you for your attention," she said. "Please enjoy the rest of your evening." She walked away from the microphone and directly toward Jung Do-hyun, who was waiting for her near the ballroom entrance with an expression that was equal parts pride and amazement. "How do you feel?" he asked as they walked out of the ballroom together. "I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow." "What do you want to do now?" "I want to go somewhere quiet and figure out who I am when I'm not planning to destroy someone." "I know a place." They left the hotel together, while behind them, 500 guests discussed the most dramatic evening in Seoul social history and wondered whether they had just witnessed justice or revenge. Most of them decided it was both. Jung Do-hyun took her to a small cafe that stayed open all night, the kind of place where people went when they needed to think without being disturbed. At 3 in the morning, they were the only customers, sitting across from each other with untouched coffee cups while the rest of Seoul slept through the biggest scandal in the city's recent history. "The news coverage started 20 minutes ago," Jung Do-hyun said, showing her his phone, where social media was exploding with videos from the engagement party. "Every major network in Korea is running the story." Nandi looked at the headlines scrolling across the screen. "Shocking arrest at Seoul Society engagement party. Restaurant empire built on kidnapped child's stolen work. Missing iris reveals 23-year deception at public event." How do you feel about that? Satisfied, relieved, empty. Empty? I spent 3 years building toward tonight. Every decision, every business move, every relationship was calculated to lead to this moment. Now that it's over, I don't know what to do with myself. Jung Do-hyun reached across the table and took her hand gently. "You could start by figuring out what makes you happy when it has nothing to do with justice or revenge. What if I don't know how to be happy? Then we figure it out together." "Jung Do-hyun, you just watched me destroy your brother's engagement and humiliate your family in front of 500 people. Why aren't you angry with me?" "Because you saved my brother from marrying someone who was slowly poisoning him. Because you exposed criminals who were harming innocent people. Because you showed me what real courage looks like. What if there are parts of me that are broken from everything that happened? What if I don't know how to trust people or build normal relationships? Then we take it slow. We figure it out one day at a time. We learn together. Nandi studied his face in the dim lighting of the empty cafe, looking for signs that he was saying what he thought she wanted to hear rather than what he actually felt. Jung Do-yun, what do you want? Really want? Not what you think you should want, but what you actually want. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I'm going to see you. I want to build something meaningful together, whether it's restaurants or foundations or just a life that makes us both happy. I want to learn what makes you laugh when you're not planning strategic destruction. What if I'm not good at being loved? What if I don't know how to let someone take care of me? Then I'll wait while you learn, and I'll try not to take it personally when you need space to figure things out. What if it takes years? Then it takes years. The simplicity of his answer made something inside her chest loosen for the first time in 3 years. Not the tight control she had maintained while building her empire and planning her revenge, but genuine relaxation. Jung Do-yun? Yes? I think I would like to find out what it feels like to be happy. Good, because I think I would like to help you find out. They sat in the quiet cafe until sunrise, talking about everything except business and justice and the family that had just been destroyed. They talked about favorite foods and childhood memories that were not stolen. They talked about places they wanted to travel and things they wanted to build, and the kind of life that might be possible when revenge was not the primary motivation. When the sun came up over Seoul, Nandi felt like she was seeing the city for the first time. Not as a place where she had been victimized or a battlefield where she had fought for justice, but as a place where she might actually want to live. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media interviews, and business meetings that would determine how the Park family's assets would be redistributed. Min Seo was denied bail after prosecutors argued she was a flight risk with access to financial resources that had been obtained through criminal activity. She spent the weeks before her trial in a Seoul detention center, probably realizing for the first time that actions actually had consequences. Park Jun-ho and Kim Soo-min were released on bail, but under house arrest, with ankle monitors that tracked their every movement. Their bank accounts were frozen, their business licenses were revoked, and their reputation was destroyed so completely that even their former friends stopped returning phone calls. The Park family restaurant locations were closed permanently after health department inspectors found evidence of contamination that dated back years. Dozens of former customers came forward with stories of food poisoning and mysterious illnesses that suddenly made sense. But the most satisfying part for Nandi was not watching her enemies fall. It was watching the foundation rise. The Chairman Nkosi Foundation for Missing Children officially launched 3 weeks after the engagement party. Funded with 47 billion won from Nandi's inheritance, plus all assets recovered from the Park family's criminal enterprise. The foundation's first project was a residential facility for children who had been separated from their families through kidnapping, trafficking, or other criminal activities. The second project was a legal aid program to help families navigate the complex process of recovering missing children and prosecuting the people who had taken them. The third project was a scholarship program for young chefs who wanted to build careers in cooking without being exploited by employers who might steal their work or take credit for their creativity. Every child deserves to know who they really are, Nandi said during the foundation's launch announcement. And every young person deserves credit for their own work and talent. This foundation exists to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, the foundation had received inquiries from families in 12 countries. Within a month, they had opened offices in 5 cities and hired professional staff to handle cases that were being reported faster than they could process them. Nandi discovered that building something positive was much more satisfying than tearing something negative down. But the most unexpected discovery was how much she enjoyed working with Jung Do-hyun on projects that had nothing to do with revenge. Their restaurant partnership had evolved into something much bigger and more complex. Together, they were developing a chain of training facilities where young chefs could learn advanced techniques while retaining full ownership of their recipes and innovations. "It's like the opposite of what happened to you," Jung Do-hyun said during one of their planning meetings. "Instead of stealing young people's work, we help them protect it and profit from it. And instead of making them invisible, we help them build their own reputations and recognition." What should we call it? The Nandi Nkosi Culinary Academy. Are you sure you want your name on it? I spent 23 years being invisible. I never want to be invisible again. The first academy location opened 6 months after the engagement party, in a building that had previously housed one of the Park family restaurants. Nandi insisted on opening it in the same space where she had once cooked as unpaid labor, transforming the site of her exploitation into a place where other young people would be empowered and protected. On opening day, she stood in the same kitchen where she had once been invisible and watched 12 young chefs prepare their first professional meal with their names prominently displayed on every dish they created. "How does it feel?" Jung Do-hyun asked, standing beside her and watching the organized chaos of a busy kitchen staffed by people who were learning to build careers rather than just survive jobs. "Like coming home," she said. "But to a home I built for myself instead of one where I was trapped." "What do you want to do next?" "I want to expand the academy to other cities. I want to open a second foundation location for missing children. I want to write a cookbook that tells my story and shares the recipes that were stolen from me." "What else?" "I want to have dinner with you somewhere that's not a business meeting. I want to go to a movie where we don't discuss strategy or legal proceedings. I want to figure out what it feels like to be in love with someone when I'm not planning to destroy my enemies." "That sounds like a very good plan." "Jung Do-hyun? Yes? I think I'm ready to find out what happy feels like." "I think you've been happy for weeks. You just haven't noticed because you were too busy building amazing things." She looked around the kitchen where young people were creating beautiful food while building their own futures. Then at the man who had stood beside her through the most dangerous and difficult period of her life. You might be right. Meanwhile, the criminal trials were proceeding exactly as Nandi had hoped they would. Min Seo's trial began 8 months after her arrest, with overwhelming evidence that left her defense attorney with very few options. The audio recordings, witness testimony, financial records, and medical documentation painted a picture of someone who had attempted murder to protect a criminal enterprise built on stolen labor. The prosecutor's opening statement was devastating. Min Seo Park hired assassins to kill the sister who had discovered that her entire family fortune was built on kidnapping, identity fraud, and theft. When that murder attempt failed, she continued to benefit from stolen work while believing her victim was dead. This is not a case of family conflict or business disagreement. This is attempted murder in service of organized criminal activity. Min Seo's attorney argued that she had acted out of fear and family loyalty rather than criminal intent. But the evidence was too extensive and too damning for that defense to be effective. The most dramatic moment came when Nandi testified about the attack, describing in detail how she had been grabbed by 3 men, beaten unconscious, and left to die while Minseo stood over her, explaining why she needed to disappear. She told me that I was never really part of their family, Nandi said from the witness stand, her voice steady and clear. She said I was a project that got out of hand. She said she would rather I disappear again than let me destroy what they had built on my stolen work. How did that make you feel? It made me understand that they had never seen me as a person. I was property to them. Useful property that generated income and work. But property nonetheless. When I started asking questions that threatened their ownership of my life and work, they decided that property needed to be disposed of. The courtroom was completely silent during her testimony. Several jurors were visibly emotional, and even Minseo's parents, who were attending every day of the trial, looked like they were finally understanding the magnitude of what their family had done. Minseo was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 15 years in prison without possibility of parole for the first 7 years. Park Jun-ho and Kim Soo-min were convicted of kidnapping, identity fraud, financial exploitation of a minor, and child abuse. They received 10-year sentences and were ordered to pay full restitution to Nandi for 23 years of unpaid labor, stolen prize money, and emotional damages. The total restitution amount was calculated at 120 million won, which was transferred directly to the Chairman Nkosi Foundation to fund programs for other missing children. Justice has been served, the judge said during sentencing. But more importantly, these convictions send a clear message that children are not property to be exploited, that adoption is not an opportunity for financial gain, and that families who abuse the trust placed in them will face the full consequences of their actions. Nandi attended every day of the trials, not out of vengeance, but out of respect for the legal process and the other families who needed to see that justice was possible, even decades after crimes were committed. On the day of the final sentencing, she made a statement to the media that had been covering the case since the engagement party scandal. Today marks the end of a 23-year crime, but it also marks the beginning of something much more important. The foundation established with recovered assets will ensure that other families separated by crime have resources to find each other and rebuild their lives. The Culinary Academy will ensure that young people's work is protected and credited properly. And the legal precedent set by these convictions will make it harder for other families to exploit children the way I was exploited. Do you feel that justice has been achieved? A reporter asked. I feel that accountability has been achieved. Justice is what we build going forward to make sure this never happens to anyone else. Do you forgive the Park family for what they did to you? Nandi considered the question carefully before answering. Forgiveness is not something I owe to people who committed crimes against me. But healing is something I owe to myself. I have found healing through building positive things rather than dwelling on negative things. Whether that constitutes forgiveness is not important to me. What's important is that I have reclaimed my identity, my work, my life, and my future. What's next for you personally? I'm planning a wedding. The announcement surprised everyone, including the reporters who had been following her story for months. To Young Do-hyun? To Young Do-hyun, we've been building something beautiful together, and we've decided we want to make it official. When will the wedding take place? Next spring, in the garden behind the Chairman Nkosi Foundation's first residential facility. We want our wedding to be a celebration not just of our love, but of the positive things that can grow from difficult situations. Will it be a large ceremony? No, just family and close friends. People who understand that the most important victories are often the quietest ones. Beautiful souls, I am literally sobbing with joy right now. From a girl locked in a basement to a woman planning her wedding in a garden that represents everything she built from her own ashes. The way Nandi transformed her pain into purpose, her trauma into triumph, and found love in the middle of seeking justice is giving me all the feels. But we're not done yet, because this love story is about to get even more beautiful. And the final chapter of Nandi's transformation is going to leave you believing in happy endings all over again. Jung Do-hyun proposed 6 months after the trials ended, in the kitchen of the first culinary academy location. He waited until the end of a busy day, when all the students had gone home, and they were alone in the space that represented everything they had built together. "Nandi," he said, as she was reviewing the day's lesson plans and student evaluations. Look at me for a minute." She looked up from her paperwork and found him standing beside the prep station where she had been working, holding a small velvet box that made her heart stop completely. "Jung Do-hyun, what are you doing?" "I'm asking you to marry me." "Here? In the kitchen?" "In the kitchen where you taught me that cooking is about transformation, where you showed me that the most beautiful things come from taking raw ingredients and turning them into something extraordinary, where we learned to build something together that's bigger than either of us could create alone." He opened the box to reveal a ring that was simple and elegant, with a diamond that caught the kitchen lights and threw rainbows across the stainless steel surfaces. "Nandi Nkosi, you are the most extraordinary person I have ever met. You survived things that would have destroyed most people. You built an empire from nothing while planning justice that most people would never have the courage to pursue. You transformed yourself from victim to victor without losing your compassion for other people who are suffering. Jung Do-hyun, I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you, building with you, loving you, and helping you continue to transform difficult things into beautiful things. Will you marry me?" Nandi looked at this man who had chosen to stand beside her through the most dangerous and difficult period of her life, who had helped her plan justice without asking for anything in return, who had seen her at her most strategic and most vulnerable and loved both versions of her equally. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her gently while the kitchen around them sparkled with the light from diamond rainbows and the promise of a future built on love rather than revenge. "One condition," she said when they broke apart. "Anything. I want the wedding cake to be made by students from our academy, with their names prominently displayed as the bakers. I want our wedding to be a celebration of young people getting credit for their own work." "Perfect. What else do you want?" "I want my mother's recipes served at the reception. The real ones. The ones she taught me before the fire. The ones I remembered while building my empire. I want to celebrate both families that shaped me, the one I lost and the one I chose. What else? I want to invite Mr. Kwan to walk me down the aisle. He saved my life that night in the alley, and he helped me reclaim it by being willing to testify against the people who tried to take it from me. He would be honored. And I want the ceremony to be held in the foundation garden, with all the children who are staying there invited to participate. I want them to see that people who survive terrible things can build beautiful lives. It sounds like the most meaningful wedding in Seoul's history. It sounds like coming home. The wedding planning took 8 months, not because the ceremony was complicated, but because Nandi wanted every detail to be intentional and meaningful, rather than simply beautiful or expensive. The invitations were designed by teenagers from the Foundation's art therapy program. The flowers were grown in the garden that the residential facility children maintained as part of their healing activities. The music was provided by young people who had found their families through the Foundation's reunification program. And the menu was entirely created by students from the Culinary Academy, with each dish credited to its creator, and the story behind each recipe included in the program. Jung Seojun served as his brother's best man, looking healthier and happier than he had in years after recovering from the chemical poisoning, and ending his engagement to someone who had been systematically harming him. "I owe you my life," he told Nandi during the wedding rehearsal. "If you hadn't exposed what Minseo was doing, I would probably be dead within a year. You don't owe me anything, but you could do me a favor. Anything. Help us expand the Culinary Academy program. Young chefs need mentors who understand both the business side and the creative side of cooking. You could help them build careers that protect their work and give them proper credit. I would be honored to help." "Good. Because I have a feeling that building positive things is going to be much more satisfying than we ever imagined." The wedding day arrived in late spring, when Seoul's weather was perfect and the foundation garden was in full bloom. 100 guests sat in chairs arranged in a circle around a small gazebo that the residential facility children had helped to decorate with flowers and ribbons and handwritten messages of hope. Nandi wore a dress that was simple but stunning, with a veil that had belonged to Thandi and had been shipped from Nigeria by distant relatives who wanted to be represented at the wedding of the daughter who had finally come home. She walked down a path, lined with children from the foundation, each of whom had been given a flower to hand her as she passed. By the time she reached the gazebo, she was carrying a bouquet that represented every child who had been separated from their family, and every child who had been reunited with people who loved them. Mr. Kwan walked beside her with tears streaming down his face, honored to escort the child whose life he had saved to the wedding that represented everything beautiful that could grow from surviving something terrible. Jung Do-hyun waited for her at the gazebo, wearing a traditional Korean wedding outfit that his grandmother had worn to her own wedding 60 years earlier. When Nandi reached him, he was smiling with the kind of joy that made everyone in the garden smile too. The ceremony was conducted in Korean and English, with translations provided for the international guests who had flown in from countries where the foundation was already operating. But the most important words were the ones Nandi and Jung Do-hyun spoke to each other, vows they had written together during long conversations about the kind of life they wanted to build. "Jung Do-hyun," Nandi said, her voice clear and strong, "you taught me that love is not about finding someone who completes you, but about finding someone who inspires you to become the person you were always meant to be. You stood beside me during the darkest period of my life and helped me transform pain into purpose. I promise to spend the rest of our marriage helping you become the person you're meant to be, and building beautiful things together from whatever ingredients life gives us." "Nandi," Jung Do-hyun replied, "you taught me that strength is not about avoiding difficult things, but about facing them with courage and creativity. You showed me that the most powerful weapon against injustice is not anger, but the determination to build something better. I promise to spend the rest of our marriage supporting your dreams, protecting your work, and loving both the warrior who fought for justice and the artist who creates beautiful things from impossible situations." They exchanged rings that had been made by a jewelry designer who donated her services to the foundation, with diamonds that had been ethically sourced and settings that incorporated silver from Korea and gold from Nigeria, representing both sides of Nandi's heritage. When the officiant pronounced them married, the entire garden erupted in applause and tears and the kind of joy that comes from watching people who deserve happiness finally claim it. The reception lasted until midnight, with food that told the story of Nandi's journey from stolen child to successful entrepreneur to married woman building a legacy of justice and love. Students from the Culinary Academy served dishes inspired by Nigerian traditions, Korean classics, and Italian techniques that represented every place she had lived and every identity she had claimed. The most moving moment came during the toasts, when children from the residential facility stood up to speak about what the foundation had meant to them and what Nandi's story had taught them about surviving difficult things and building beautiful lives. "Before I came here," said a 12-year-old girl who had been trafficked and was still working with lawyers to locate her family, "I thought that bad things that happened to you meant you would never be happy. But watching Nandi build all this from what happened to her taught me that you can use bad things to help other people and create good things. Now I think maybe I can be happy again someday." There was not a dry eye in the garden. The evening ended with Nandi and Jung Do-hyun dancing to a song that Thandi had loved, played by musicians from the Foundation's music therapy program. As they moved together in the garden, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by their work, Nandi felt something she had never experienced before. Complete peace. Not the satisfaction of justice delivered or the pride of successful revenge, but the deep, quiet happiness that comes from building a life based on love and purpose, rather than pain and anger. "How do you feel, Mrs. Jung?" her new husband whispered in her ear as they danced. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she whispered back. "Like everything terrible that happened was worth surviving because it led to this." "What do you want to do tomorrow?" "I want to wake up next to you, have breakfast with the Foundation children, review applications for the new academy location, and start planning our honeymoon." "Where do you want to go for our honeymoon?" "Nigeria. I want to meet my mother's family and see the places she used to tell me about when I was small. I want to understand that part of my heritage the way I understand the Korean part." "That sounds perfect." They danced until the last song played, and the last guest went home, leaving them alone in the garden, where they had promised to love each other and build beautiful things together for the rest of their lives. As they walked through the Foundation building, checking on the children who were safely asleep in their beds, Nandi realized that this was what justice really looked like. Not the destruction of her enemies, but the creation of something so positive and meaningful that it made the suffering worthwhile. "Jung Do-hyun?" "Yes. I think I understand now what my mother meant when she told me to save my strength for the fight ahead." "What did she mean?" "She meant that the real fight was never about destroying the people who hurt me. The real fight was about building something so beautiful from the pain that it transforms not just my life, but the lives of other people who need to believe that survival is possible." "And did you win the fight?" Nandi looked around at the building, full of children who were safe and loved, thought about the academy students who were learning to protect their work and build their careers, and considered the foundation that was helping families find each other around the world. "Yes," she said, taking his hand as they walked toward their new life together. "I won. Beautiful souls. We did it." From a girl locked in a basement with a list of names under her pillow, to a woman standing in a garden surrounded by love and the empire she built from her own ashes. From invisible and exploited to impossible to ignore and completely victorious. From stolen child to Chairman Nkosi to Mrs. Jung, building foundations and changing lives and proving that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. This is what I need you to understand. Nandi's story is not just about getting even. It's about getting free. Free from the people who tried to define her, free from the pain that tried to destroy her, and free to build something so magnificent that it makes every scar worth carrying. She taught us that justice isn't just about making people pay. It's about making sure no one else has to suffer the same way. She showed us that love is possible even after trauma. She proved that you can be both the warrior who fights and the artist who creates, both the survivor who heals and the victor who conquers.